Hi, welcome. My name is Kristen Sussman, and I am a doctoral candidate at the University of Texas at Austin. And today I'm going to walk through how to use Facebook advertising to create a Facebook ad for the purposes of research. So I have spoken previously about using social media listening tools like BrandWatch to gather text or behavioral trace data, which can be a really good source of data for research. But today we want to talk about how you might design a quasi-experimental design on Facebook using their advertising platform. So we're going to be working out of the Facebook Ads Manager. To get to the Ads Manager, you'll go to business.facebook.com. Now you will need to have access to a business page, and you'll need to have been added as an advertiser to the business manager, the business suite that you see here. Just for a little context, this example is related to some research that we're doing for the Center for Media Engagement. This is a grant-funded project that I was pulled in to work on. And what we're doing with these ads is we are targeting African Americans and Black Americans, and we are working to increase vaccine uptake and decrease vaccine hesitancy. So I guess before I begin, I'd like to show you what we are working toward. So I'm going to kind of start with the end in sight, because that will help you understand what you'll get by running ads on Facebook. So when you get to this home screen, there's a link here for ads, but you'll want to be sure to actually go to Ads Manager. Ads Manager is going to give you a lot more control over the advertisement. So for example, you'll be able to do things like control the location, control the advertising objective, control the frequency. So if the ad's seen only one time or more than one time. So there's a lot more functionality in the Ads Manager than there is in this just sort of generic ads creation tool. So always use the Ads Manager. Long story short. Okay, so this is the Ads Manager. And so we'll walk through here in a second how to create an ad, but first I want to show you, again, what we're working toward. So in the top right, there's a calendar here that you can adjust the date range that you're looking at. Maximum. Okay, I'm going to put maximum because it's going to give us more visibility into the data. But so these are all past ads that have been run through this Facebook page, through the Center for Media Engagement. And so this is actually some ads that we ran last time. We started with a pilot test first, which is a good approach, just to kind of walk through and see how the ads perform and the nuances of creating them. I'll also just mention that generally speaking, I create an ad plan. I usually use PowerPoint, but of course you could use whatever format you want. And I actually map out my ad plan before I actually run the ads. But I use Facebook Ads Manager to do that, almost like a media planning tool, because that can give you an idea of how many people you'll potentially reach with the budget that you have. So what I wanted to show you is the ads after they're completed give you a very robust amount of behavioral data. And that's really sort of the gold that we're looking for here. So for example, like impressions. So how many people were reached by the ad? You have reach as well. How many people saw the ad under impressions? What was our cost per result? Depending on your objective, this result's going to change. I'll also just point out, whenever you're in Facebook Ads Manager, it can be a bit overwhelming at first. So, hover over these icons, and a lot of times they'll provide more information. So you can even click out to see more, for example. And Facebook's really good about providing a lot of information. They want you to be successful as an advertiser, so it does sort of benefit them as well. Also, There's what's called the Facebook Help Manager. And this is really helpful when you are learning, let's say, which objective to choose for your ad. You can type in things like advertising objective, just as an example. And the Help Center has a lot of resources here for you to help as you're learning how to do your ads or learning more about the specifics in the Ads Manager. So I don't want to spend too much more time here, but generally the data that I focus on in my research and my work is revolving around the literature stream known as engagement or digital consumer engagement with advertising. So I basically focus on clicks, comments, and shares, and I sort of operationalize those metrics that are available here in Facebook as a way to understand how the ads are being processed. There's, like I said, sort of a really nice body of literature in the engagement with advertising stream of literature. Okay, so let's get into the goods. When you're ready to create an ad, you can simply click on this Create button, and this will take you to a new screen here. You have a lot of options. So for example, buying type. You can buy it by auction or reach and frequency. I typically leave this one as auction and let Facebook sort of handle that for me. Then the more important, I think, thing to choose here is going to be your campaign objective. And so again, if this is sort of new language to you or you want to learn more, the Help Center is a great resource. For our ads, we are actually driving people to a survey. So I'll be using a link in my advertisement. And so generally I work between brand awareness and traffic, and almost all ads that I run use these two objectives. But again, there's, a number of different objectives here that you could use, and they're all really interesting. So I encourage you to dig in more on your own time, but for the purposes of the training, I'll stick with traffic. After you select your objective, just kind of keep an eye out for these areas that are super easy to overlook. You can open up the bottom of the screen here, and here's where we can actually name our ad campaign. We're doing work with moral foundations theory, and I typically start with a month, an abbreviation, so that it's easy to read out here when I look at the report. June, moral foundation theory, training video. Or training, I'll keep it short and sweet. And then I typically drop this down so that it's the same across these different locations. Quickly, I do want to just help you orient and understand how these ads are set up. So in the Ads Manager, there's 3 different areas that you work out of. The first is called the campaign, then you have the ad set level, and then you have the ad level. And as you can see here in the campaign level, this is where we choose our objective, and we also tell Facebook how much money we want to spend on this advertising. So super important, your objective and your budget. At the next level, we move on to the ad set. And this is where you tell Facebook the audience you want to target, where you want your placements to appear, so your geo-targeting, and the schedule and the specific spending at the ad set level. And then last but not least, we get to the ad level, and this is where the creative magic happens. So here is where we're going to add copy and images and really set our creative specifics. So these 3 tiers, campaign, ad set, and ad, are good to learn and just sort of memorize, because we'll be working through these 3 sort of tiers in the Ads Manager. So now I'm going to click continue. And so here you see those 3 tiers we just talked about: campaign, ad set, and ad. So these are the 3 areas we're working out of. So we need to first finish working at the campaign level. So you can kind of skip the special ad categories, unless, of course, you are targeting something within one of these special categories. we are sort of borderline in the social issue since we're talking about COVID-19 and vaccines. So typically, I think it's easier if you can schedule the ad without this. But what will happen is after your ad is scheduled, it will go into a review and Facebook may flag something about your ad. And so you'll want to keep an eye after you schedule your ad to see if it is approved or not. And I'll show you where to look for that here in a second, once we're done with the creating part. Okay, so I'm going to leave that blank for now. Show more options. So I always add a campaign spending limit. You'll notice that I think when you're working with ad budgets, you want to be really careful that you don't spend more than you were given. So if you don't set this, there's no limit, but I 100% always use this. For now, I'll just do say 100. But of course, you can set this to whatever your budget is. And keep in mind, this campaign spending limit will be across all of your ads. So for instance, if I create 4 ads in this campaign, each ad may only get $25, but it will not go past 100. So once you hit that sort of cap or max, your ads will shut off. So just, again, this is where coming in and creating an ad plan first can be really helpful. And we'll see how to allocate this budget towards each ad in just a second. You have the ability to do an A/B test. I would recommend you don't use the A/B test because we are actually going to set up our own test. If you use this, what will happen is if you have 2 ads and one is performing better, Facebook will allocate all of your funds towards ad A that's performing best. And what generally happens is 95% of your budget will go towards that better performing ad. So I'd suggest just leaving that off so that you can have more control over your ads. I was speaking to a colleague earlier. It's like, just because it's behaving bad, we don't want to turn it off. We actually want to see the difference between that engagement rate of ad A and ad B. Okay, and then campaign budget optimization, again, sort of similar scenario. I leave that off. So we can click on next. Now you'll see we've kind of moved down to this next tier, which again is your ad set. So this is where we're going to set our targeting and some other specifics here in the ad set tier. So you can see on the right, this is your audience definition. This is the media planning that I was talking about earlier. So in here, I generally come in and set my location and my behaviors and my interests, and then I can get an estimate from Facebook of whether my audience is too specific or broad or just right. You do want to be careful if your ads are too specific. They won't be shown to enough people, and that'll drive up your cost. You also don't want it shown to too many people. That means you're casting too wide of a net. So you want to try to get an audience selection that is just right in the middle and is pretty well defined, not too narrow, not too broad. So we do want to drive traffic to a website. I think we're using Qualtrics or I'm not sure, but we'll be linking to another survey. So that's considered a website. So we'll leave that as is. Leave the dynamic creative off. Again, we don't want Facebook to automatically adjust. You do have a daily budget here. I always adjust this to lifetime budget. And so for this one, again, we'll set 100 and schedule. This is where we're going to set the date range. Since I'm doing a training, I'm going to set this off in the distance so that it doesn't start. But you can set this. I usually run an ad for about 5 days. You can do longer, you can do shorter, but it helps to kind of give it a nice sort of life cycle in the news feed. And then here's your ad scheduling. So this is kind of interesting, so I'll point it out. I'm not going to use it for my training video, and nor do I really use it most of the time. But if you go in here, Facebook will automatically run your ads all the time. But what you can do is you can set this up on a schedule. So let's say I'm advertising for a coffee company. What I can do is say, okay, I want people to see Madrone Coffee Company advertisements in their newsfeed only between 6 a.m. and noon, when people typically want coffee. Or maybe on the other hand, I want to test that against ads that run between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. So maybe we can see if any of these have an impact on our sales. So there's a lot of different things you can do with the schedule here. But I generally leave it just automated here as far as when the ads run. And then when you move down below, we get into the audience. So this is the meat and potatoes. This is where all of the good targeting and kind of what made Facebook and Google famous for having really well targeted advertisements. So in here, we can adjust our location, our age, and you can also target on gender. And you can save these audiences. So if you define an audience and want to save it, I'd encourage you to do that. In practice, we do that a lot for brands, because what you want to do is, use your audiences again, especially if they work really well. For research, we probably don't need to save it, but it might be helpful just to have on hand. Custom audiences and lookalike audiences. Again, I'll invite you to sort of come back to that on your own time. But for us, we are going to start with clicking on this edit icon. And again, Facebook kind of helps you along. So you can target anything from, as you'll see here, DMAs, districts, state, regions, cities, postal codes, countries. So let's just start with Texas. We're here in Texas, so let's use the great state of Texas as an example. Okay, so you can see on the map that we have Texas highlighted here. I typically leave the age 18 to 65 plus. I typically leave the gender as all genders. I generally care less about your age or your gender and tend to care more about your interests and your behaviors. Oops, I lost where I was at. Okay, so detailed targeting. If you click on the edit here, you get access to interests and behaviors. And so let's say we want to reach people in Texas who like barbecue. Should be a big audience here. And so Facebook gives me a drop down of these interests, and I can hover over them and learn more about their size and kind of their description here. Barbecue, 348 million to 409 million. So this is probably going to be too broad, but let's see. So your audience selection is fairly broad. So I'm going to show you another really neat trick about this targeting. We can narrow our audience. So let's say we don't only want people that like barbecue, but we want people who like cats. This is going to be a really interesting audience. Now you see our estimated audience drops down to 5.6 million to 6.6 million. It's still fairly broad. What if we say they also need to like, bugs? I'm not feeling very creative today, so it doesn't give me just bugs. Maybe if I do insects. So you can see how I start to try different targeting, and I see what I get access to. Let's do UT Austin, University of Texas, Austin. Okay. Still fairly broad. Okay, let's add one more. Gosh. I think I'm gonna take away these two, and this is where it becomes a little bit of trial and error. audience section is still pretty broad. Let's see. What if they like barbecue and ballet? This must be a unique group, right? 1.5 million to 1.8. I can't tell if it's getting smaller or larger. Got larger. Okay, that's what I thought was happening. So sorry, forgive me for kind of running through this. I'm going to move on because you can see how you can use this to become more targeted or narrow your audience versus having a more broadly defined audience, I should say. Sure, let's try Bug's Life since that popped up. This one might be too narrow. So this one you can see 21,000 to 25,000. It's still telling me that it's fairly broad, but I happen to know that 21,000 to 25,000 is actually a really nice size. So we're going to stick with that. You can reach people beyond your detailed targeting. For the purposes of the design of our research, I would not click on that. I would keep it specific to who we want to reach. Connections, all people. This is also really helpful. We can say exclude people who currently like or follow our page. I think that would be helpful for research because we don't want to target people that already know who the Center for Media Engagement are. And then this is where you can save the audience once you have it defined. And that's pretty easy. So I'll kind of skip over that right now. There's also automatic and manual placements. This I want to call out as really important. This is something I always 100% of the time adjust. So manual placements give you access to, oh gosh, I counted it one time. I think it's 16 different placements across all of the channels and locations that an ad can appear in the Facebook ad network. I typically take away everything but Facebook, and I typically remove stories, in-stream. I remove everything but the newsfeed. I want those ads to appear in people's news feeds. So you can see when I do this, my audience definition goes down pretty significantly. I think it's cut in half. But again, I want sort of these prime locations for my ads. And you can hover over these and see what they would look like. But I recommend always sticking with just the news feed. And then I typically leave this automated, but you can adjust the devices. So Android versus Apple, I believe it is. There's some other controls here for brand safety. I typically leave that automated. And then I optimize for link clicks, but you can adjust this. But since I want link clicks, I want them optimized for link clicks. I don't usually put a cost per result. This is where Facebook or Meta will adjust the spend, but I usually just let that be automated. And then the other thing is when you get charged, you can get charged by the impression, but I actually want to be charged by link click since that's my goal. Okay, I know that was kind of a lot. The beauty of the Ads Manager is it is a complex interface where you can do a lot. So thanks for bearing with me during that section. Now we're going to move on to the fun part, the creative. So I simply click on next. And if you do ever do anything wrong, Facebook will let you know. So you can see it's giving me this sort of alert. You need to enter a website URL. So I'm just going to grab one. Of course, this is not the real link that I'd be using. I'd be using one that connects to my survey. But again, for the training, I'll just use this link. The link goes down here at the bottom. Here, website URL. Okay, so that should fix that problem. I'm going to scroll back to the top so you can just work through everything with me real quick. You want to make sure your Facebook page is the correct Facebook page. You can see there's other options usually, depending on what you have access to, but we're running our ad through the Center for Media Engagement. You can also connect your Instagram if you are running ads on Instagram. And then I typically use manual upload and single image. So here, I also leave these dynamic experiences and full screen as disabled. So here I go to add media. We can get through this last section pretty fast. You can upload directly from your computer. I'm just going to grab one that we have handy. You can also do some editing and cropping here. So you can make sure it looks the way you want and is formatted correctly. Yes, we'll allow some enhancements, sure. And then here's where you drop your primary text. I already have some drafted. So I'm just going to drop this in. And you'll see over here as a sort of mock of your ad. There are some cool things you can do here. You can actually share a link for your ad. So if you want to have it reviewed by your peers or your colleagues, you can do that as well. And then here's where you can put a headline. Earn $20 survey. And you can also add a description. I was gonna say a penny for your thoughts. Anyway, get paid for your opinions. I don't know if this will fit. Something I would say, keep an eye on and make sure that your text doesn't get cut off because it doesn't allow you to fit much text in the space of the ad. So just keep an eye on that. And I think we're good here. One other thing to point out is this call to action. You can adjust the call to action button that is used or associated with this ad. We're going to leave ours just set to learn more, but there are other options like book now, contact us, donate, for example. And we're going to leave languages generic, tracking generic. I think everything here looks good for me. I feel happy. And so I can say publish. And you'll see it takes just a minute to publish. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it's going to go into a review. And that will go back out to our ads manager out here. And I'll just show you what that looks like on our end. So here's our training, just like we saw. We labeled it June MFT training. And if we go over here, it says scheduled because we've scheduled it. Sometimes it helps to refresh. And you can turn these on or off. So if it's off, it won't run. Keep in mind though, if you turn it off and it's scheduled to start tomorrow, your ad will not run. So usually it says, I think, awaiting review. Anyway, so you can see here. And then once it has been reviewed and approved, it'll update to approved, I believe. So you want to keep an eye on that. Oh, just one other quick best practice with these ads. Usually you have a handful of ads scheduled or running. It is always a best practice to come in and sort of check on those ads throughout the days, just to make sure nothing happened, it didn't get turned off or canceled or something made it go off. So that is the Facebook training. And my name is Kristen Sussman. And again, I'm working through the University of Texas. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, good luck with your research.